on the right-hand side, which is good news. Hopefully they're not going to go running away from me because it's quite dense in here. And we know how that all ended. There we go, there's a wild dog. There's one at least. So Ferg, I think let's try and just go up to the top here. It's going to be probably better. Oh, there we go. So that's probably our best bet is right there. So there we go. There's the rest of the pack. They're all lying in underneath the Tamboti thicket. It's a perfect place for dogs to have a nice shady afternoon of rest. And we really have been spoilt with this pack of late. They've spent a lot of time in this area. We've seen a lot of interesting behavior from them. There's obviously been the split that has happened, and it is one of the sort of a split from the Investec pack as far as I understand it. It's interesting though, the numbers keep fluctuating in these splits. It's difficult to kind of keep tabs on exactly who's who and where they all are, because they kind of come in and out, and every time they come back they're in a different sort of way, and there's different members in different places. So this is the split that doesn't have the collared dog. So this is the ones without the collar on them, and then you've got the collared ones that are also running around. Now I'm not sure where they went. The last time we had them, they were moving, I think around Chitwa area is the last time the collared dog was seen. I think, I'm not really 100% sure, but that was about a week ago. And then we've got these guys now that are also around, and I'm not sure on Friday whether James had these ones or James had the collared dog. Ferg, was the collared dog with them on?
I didn't see collar.
No collar. Okay, so it must have been this lot that was with James on Friday, and then the rest must be also around somewhere as well. So Lily Brady, you say yay wild dogs. It's always exciting when we get the dogs. The dogs are such fun to follow around and to see how they go about their business. And this morning they had an action-packed morning as they got a human fly them. They also had a leopard come charging into that area. So it was all quite interesting for the dogs, and I'm sure they had a wonderful time watching what was going on and the antics of the bush. But they do get up to all kinds of things, and it's one of the reasons why following wild dogs is so exciting, because you just never know with them what's going to happen. They seem to have a nose for leopards. They tend to find leopards very easily if they are moving. Also, they are just incredibly exciting to watch when they're on the hunt because of the way that they move. And I'm pretty sure that this afternoon we're going to see a situation where they are going to get up and get going. Remember, around Gari Dam there was lots of impalas. There's the baby wildebeest. There's some zebra around there. Now zebra's probably a little large for this group, but you never know. They wouldn't know that, and they'll hear movements of animals, and I'm pretty sure they're going to head that direction. And if they do, it will be absolute chaos if they run out onto that open area, because there's going to be animals that are going to split in every direction. Philip, you're wondering if the dogs howl. So I'm sure you're thinking also along the lines of a wolf howl. So no, not really. They will do the who call when they are trying to contact one another. So a wolf will howl when it's contacting each other, and territorial calls, whereas these guys do what's called the who call, which is a hollow hooing sound, and they do it regularly. And in fact, lately we've been hearing quite a bit of it from the collared pack in particular. They seem to be doing it quite a lot, and I'll play it for you now. I've got the actual call, but I don't want to play it too loudly because they do react very strongly to the call. So we just got to keep it a little bit down. So that's what it sounds like. So there we go. We're not going to play it too long. You can see how they poked up their ears, because when they hear that, and particularly this time of the year, they know that this is dogs that are looking for each other. There has been a split, so there's been a lot of calling that's going on. It's also this time of the year where they start sorting out alphas and in terms of the pairing, and so they make a lot of noise, and so playing that call is not really good because it gets them very excitable, and that's why I don't want to do it for too long. But that's the sound that they make. They don't really howl. They do also have an excited squeaking sound when they find food or other members of the pack, and or when they get going in the afternoons to start hunting or the mornings, then you'll hear this excited chatter that goes on. And then if they see a predator, they will also not howl. It's more like a bark that they let out. So it's this rough sort of sound that comes out. It's a little bit shorter than what you'd hear from a dog's bark, but it is that loud sort of kind of sound that is very rough in its tone. And so those are the noises that dogs make. James, you're wondering if they have a den around? So no. Wild dogs, when they're denning, will den between normally May and into as far late as September would be a very late den period. So over the winter months is when wild dogs den. So this pack is not denning at all, and that's why their movement is so much at the moment. So they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out, and they're not fixed in one location. If they had a den, you'd pretty much find them most days at the same spot, and they would have a little termite mound where they'll have little ones. But the good thing is that if they're spending a lot of time here, and because there's been this fracture of the pack, you never know. Maybe they decide that this is going to be a good area for them to den next year, and we then have them in this particular section. Or the collared pack, the one with the collared dog in it, that split might decide to den here. So there's options now at least, and that's always good news when it comes to wild dogs. And a wild dog den is one of the most phenomenal things to have, not only because you get to see the dogs daily, but you get this amazing interaction, and you get to watch the social structure and how the bonding happens from an early age, and how tight that unit is, and the efficiency of these adults to be able to try and go back and forward and feed these ones, as also the tribulations that these guys and trials that they have that it takes to raise little puppies. It's absolutely phenomenally difficult for them there. Hyenas to worry about, lions, leopard. They've got martial eagles that come in every now and then and kill the puppies. They've got tawny eagles even. I've heard of battalier eagles feasting on a wild dog puppy before. Whether it was dead, I'm not sure, but I have heard of that as well. So a number of different things that they've got to worry about, and the puppies are tiny when they're born. They really are cute little things when they run around. And so if we get a den, it will be super exciting. It is one of the most phenomenal things. And on top of it, like I say, is you just see the most amazing stuff from the dogs themselves, because they're pretty localized, and so every day you can almost get a hunt out of them every morning and afternoon, which is absolutely phenomenal. So hopefully next year we will be able to show you guys a den. I don't think we've ever had a den on Safari Live. I'm not sure if we have. Maybe some of the viewers that have been watching for all these years will know if we've ever had a den site that we've monitored, but I can tell you it is an amazing thing to watch. The problem with the wild dog den is that you kind of have to have a tough, thick skin for it, because there is a number of things that happen at den sites that are tough, from heads of animals to be brought back, and then also from the standpoint that you will find a lot of these dogs unfortunately will die. The little pups, they don't last, a lot of them, and the mortality rate is over 50% in those puppies. So you can't get too attached to the puppies for early on. Unfortunately, it is quite traumatic in that regard. Now, Scarlett, you're wondering if these wild dogs are in any way similar or related to the dingoes of Australia. So I don't think so. I mean, dingoes are also part of the canine kind of family, and wild dogs are also part of that lineage, but they're not directly related in any way. They're not part of the exact same order, or I'm sorry, the exact same family grouping. These guys tend to be on their own little pathway, and not with dingoes as far as I know, but they are probably under the same sort of dog family, so you'll find them and jackals and various others that will kind of be part of that, and they will be on their own sort of then family grouping from there. But a lot of similarities with the dingo, except that as far as I understand, the dingo is more a solitary specimen. I don't know that much about them, so I would imagine that they would be a little bit different in that they're not quite as pack animal like as what we see from the wild dogs. The wild dogs tend to be far more kind of into the pack lifestyle and be a lot more like that all the time than what dingoes are. From what my limited observations have been, and like I say, I don't really know much about dingoes, and so it's something I'll have to go and read up on, but I don't think that they are directly related. I think it's probably just under the same canine family essentially. But absolutely wonderful to see these guys. Like I say, I mean, now we're just being patient. At the end, they're not going to be down like this the whole afternoon. It's resting time now, and then they are going to get up some point this afternoon. So it's a lottery as to when they're going to get up. You've just got to try and be there at the right place at the right time, and hopefully then we get lucky and they get up and go on the move. I would imagine it will be just around sunset. That's normally when the dogs get up, although there is a really nice wind blowing, so it's a little cooler than it has been the past few days, which might drop what they would have been yesterday or the day before. Also, they are not very full. You can see that their stomachs aren't exactly swollen, so they will be hungry, and that bodes well for an exciting afternoon of wild dog chasing, and hopefully, like I say, that it will be a much safer affair than what we had this morning, but just as exciting in terms of leopards and various other things that they came across this morning. There you can see the nice toe structure of the wild dog, and so if any of you that are into tracking, you'll be able to see now why we are able to kind of identify wild dog tracks from hyena tracks. While they do have the two lobes, you can see on the back pad there that the lobe is almost squared off on the bottom, so there's not very visible lobes. So when these guys step, they leave a much straighter back pad, and then you see how their toes are quite far from the pad, and there is a definite split between them, so they are still quite rounded, whereas the hyenas are quite squashed together and form those little banana shapes. And then also these guys have very narrow feet, so those back pads, or the toes are all squashed quite close together, so very long, very narrow track both on the back and the front foot, and it's a nice way to see it from the bottom side. And you can imagine how many miles those little feet have traveled. They've probably taken this dog all over the place, and it would actually be wonderful to know how many miles or kilometers a wild dog runs in a lifetime. It's obviously difficult because a lot of the dogs don't live out their full lifespan, but some of the older dogs, it would be interesting to know just how far they've traveled in their life. I think we would be astounded to know, because I mean, some of these dogs will do easily 200, 300 kilometers in the space of 4 or 5 days. So you can imagine how many that would be in a sort of 6-7 years. Matt, you're asking if I've heard of anyone trying to domesticate the wild dogs. Well, I mean, I've heard of people that have wild dogs in rehabilitation centers, and they never really become completely domestic. I haven't heard of anybody trying to actually sort of keep them as a pet. I'm sure people have, and I'm sure back in the day it was something that was tried extensively, but it's not something that should be done, and they're not an animal that probably does well being confined into spaces. And if you find wild dogs in any of the zoos around the world, it's a very sad sight to see, and you find the dogs get fat. They become, lazy in a way because they can't move around, and their body to have as a pet, but I'm sure people have tried. It's also not the kind of cleanest animal. They smell very, very bad, and they also are quite feisty, so it would be, I think, a difficult task to keep one of these alive. I think you'd have to have a serious budget to be able to feed wild dogs, keep them as pets. But again, also they're now so endangered that you wouldn't even be able to domesticate them and keep them as pets. It would be highly illegal to do that. It's only these rehabilitation centers that try and take in dogs that are injured that have them. Otherwise, it's not something that you can keep. Right, now while I sit here with our dogs and wait for them to start waking up and hope that maybe Tundi even makes an appearance, let's go across to Scotty D and see how he's progressed in the search. Our doggies are still sleeping, still taking it easy. The one on the right is particularly my favorite because it's got its head tucked up against a tree. So it's decided that it's far more comfortable just to lean against the tree like that and just use the tree as a pillow. Although I don't think I could share that sentiment. It looks highly uncomfortable from this angle, but seems to be working for that wild dog. He seems to be pretty happy with life, leaning up against a tree, ear tucked behind it, and so, well, good on him. I suppose if he's happy with it, or she, I can't see if it's a male or female. Well, then, good on them. Now, the rest of the pack is all sleeping, and one dog did stand up and started sneezing. So this is something that we've discussed before, but for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, is that we have read an article recently. It was a study that went on about wild dogs sneezing and whether that indicates what's going on. And so there is a thought process and a kind of paper that's been written on that. When wild dogs start to sneeze, it's almost like a voting process, particularly in packs where there's no alpha pair that has been formed, which is like this pack we have here. And the sneeze is almost like a vote, as if it's time to get going and moving and hunting, or is it time just to sit and rest, or what the case may be. And so I got up just now and started sneezing attention, but it's starting to happen, which is good news for us. It means that maybe, just maybe, we're going to start seeing them waking up at some point. You wouldn't say so from the one passed out against the tree. It almost looks like he's had too much to drink, and his friend to the left, that is kind of got his head down on his paw and is also fast asleep. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's an interesting thing, and hopefully we'll catch it this afternoon. Hopefully we'll see a situation where they do start waking up, and we'll get that sneezing caught on camera, because it is amazing. To it. Since that day, I've watched these dogs And every single time they get up, they start sneezing. Every single one of them. And it is a kind of this vote process that goes on. It's absolutely fascinating. Shauna, you're wondering if the ears of a wild dog are its greatest strength. So, Shauna, as an individual, yes, their ears will most certainly be one of their best senses that they've got. They are massive, they're going to hear everything, but the wild dog's greatest strength is that they are in a pack. That is the one thing that a wild dog has over all these other predators, and why they can bully leopards and bully hyenas and not so much lions, but the other predators that are around, they definitely can take them on. It's because they're in a pack. So their single greatest strength is that they have this pack unity, and that it is a very strong social bond between them. If they had to remove them and go at one dog, the chances of survival is very slim, but the ears would definitely be one of the biggest senses that they would use to survive. Although I think that in wind like this, or in certain ways, the ears aren't going to pick up things, and it'd just be very difficult. At least when they're in a pack like this, they can watch each other's back, and they can try and defend each other should anything happen. So their biggest single strength is most definitely that they are a pack animal, and that they are in numbers together. What surprises me is that we have seen also some of these dogs in smaller groupings together that have done really well. So if we take that Lower Sabi breakaway pack, those 3 dogs, which we haven't seen too much of recently, I wonder if it's because of these 2 bigger packs that have been operating here a lot, have kind of pushed those 3 away. But those 3 dogs have done so well. They've been on their own now for almost 2 years, and yet they are still running around. There's still the 3 of them, and for that to have happened is really quite phenomenal. Dogs, unfortunately, live a very charmed life, and they have a situation where they get themselves into trouble quite a lot, and so there's often fatalities and casualties within the pack. So amazing that those 3 that have kind of settled, and that they've kind of kept themselves safe. Now, this is very exciting news, and I'm very, very excited for Scotty D. It seems as though he's fine. Sometimes being live in the African bush means that we have a few difficulties technically, and sometimes we'll lose our audio and signal, so I apologize about that. But as you can see there, lying under the bush is a very beautiful wild dog. Now, these are some of the most endangered predators that we get here in South Africa, so this is an absolute treat. It is a very, very warm welcome to our 3 schools that are joining us this afternoon. I hope that you'll have the most wonderful time with us. My name is Tristan, and on camera I've got Ferg, and like I say, these endangered wild dogs have been sitting under this bush resting, and we are with them at the perfect time of day, because they sit and they rest through the hot part of the day, and as that sun goes down, that's when they start to wake up, and they might then go on a hunt. And these guys are incredibly fun to watch when they go on a hunt, because they are very, very quick, and they chase everything that you guys will get to see just how much fun wild dogs can be. They were some of our absolute favorite animals, and I was saying to you that they are very endangered, and that's because there's very few of these guys left in the world. There's only probably here in South Africa, in the part of South Africa that we're in, there's only about 220 of them. And what we've got sitting here is 5 of those 220, so that's not very many wild dogs, and so it's a very special treat for all of you to be able to see them. Now, they look a little bit like normal dogs in some ways. They've kind of got that dog-like face, but what you will notice is that they all have a very pretty color. So they've got black muzzles with the cream coloration and little spots of white that helps to camouflage them. And then you also notice, look at how big their ears are. So they've got massive ears, and they will use those ears to listen to what's going on around them, so that when they're hunting, they can hear the animals that are running away from them that they are chasing. Because the pack of dogs, they won't stalk like a cat. They will run in and just cause absolute chaos and chase everything that is anywhere near. Ava, you were wondering about their ears and why they have such big ears. Well, the reason is because they have a situation where they're very small animals, so they're not big, and it means that the grass grows at about the same height as their heads, and so they can't often see what's going on in front of them, but those big ears help to catch a lot of sound. The bigger the ear, the more that they're able to hear, and they can then hear not only their prey animals that are coming towards them, coming, or hyenas or something like that, and be able to then get away before they get hunted. Angel, you're wondering how many wild dogs there are in South Africa? Well, in the whole of South Africa, there's about 450 wild dogs, so not very many. And unfortunately, because wild dogs are the way that they are, and because they're in areas where there's a lot of other different predators around, they really struggle to be able to survive. They have an over 50% mortality rate within the pups, and so when the pups are born, like I say, it's over 50% of them will die. Of predators that we get out here, including snakes and eagles, and so they have a tough time of it. The thing is, though, is that generally with wild dogs, if they can get past that first year, they normally survive all right, because they're then part of the pack, and as a pack together, they can often defend themselves from some of those more bigger and stronger predators that we get out here. Ryan, you're wondering what wild dogs eat. Well, wild dogs will eat pretty much most small to medium-sized antelope, so things like impalas that are a very similar animal to a deer that you get in the United States. They'll also eat things like scrub hares, which are a nocturnal type of rabbit, if you want to call it that. They will go after even sometimes larger antelope species, so something like a wildebeest or even baby zebras. They do go after even sometimes baby giraffes. So they've got quite a wide amount of food items, but it depends on the size of the pack. The bigger the pack, the bigger the animals that they will hunt. So if you've got a pack of 30 dogs, they're going to be going after things like a wildebeest or a zebra. When you've got a pack of 5 dogs like we've got here, they will be targeting more things like impalas, duikers, so those smaller antelope species that are much easier for them to be able to hunt. But it's interesting, when they do hunt, you would think that they will work together as a pack, but they don't. They all chase in different directions, and those animals will bounce around and go off, and each one will chase, and there's just absolute chaos, and sometimes the animal will run into another dog and they'll grab it, or they'll chase that animal until the animal becomes absolutely fatigued and just falls over, and they can then grab it, and the whole pack will come in and feed from there. It's really amazing to watch. Caden, you're wondering how fast they are? Well, they run at about 35 miles an hour, so pretty quick, and they have amazing stamina. So while they're not the fastest of all our predators out here, things like cheetah and lions are a little bit quicker, and they'll run a slightly faster. These guys just have the stamina to be able to outrun pretty much everything. So they are built for long distance. You can think of them like a marathon runner. So I don't know if any of you have done long distance running, but that's how the wild dogs are. They're able just to keep going and going and going, and they'll fatigue any of the animals that are around them, and they'll try and chase them down until they are tired, and they'll then grab them. So it is an amazing thing to watch, and it's very different to the way something like a leopard would hunt, that stalks in and gets very, very close and then ambushes that animal. So, Justin, you're wondering if wild dogs would overpower a regular dog? Most certainly they would. Wild dogs are tough animals. They're built to be able to survive out here in the wild, and they fight with things like leopard and lion and hyena, which are very powerful animals. And so a normal domestic dog would have a tough time, because it's not going to only be attacked by one. The wild dogs will all attack together, and so 5 of them together would definitely be able to take on a domestic dog and do a lot of damage. And I've actually, funny enough, seen wild dogs kill a domestic dog. Unfortunately, the domestic dog got lost and somehow got into the national park, and these wild dogs grabbed that domestic dog and killed it very, very quickly. So unfortunately, domestic dogs don't really stand a chance. It would be interesting, though, if we had a big breed of dogs, maybe something like a Great Dane or a Tibetan Mastiff. That might be a bit different. It would be interesting to see, but there's so few of domestic dogs that will get into these areas, because we try and keep them out as much as possible, because most times that domestic dogs come into this area, they generally are lost, and if they're lost, it sometimes means that they've got a disease called rabies, and rabies will affect their orientation, so they don't know how to get home, and they then drift into these wild areas. And if the dogs eat an animal with rabies, then you're going to find that they get it and they can all die. And that's why the numbers of wild dogs are so low, is because of rabies and canine distemper, which has been brought by animals from the outside. So, Michael, you were wondering about rabies, and yes, they do get rabies, and unfortunately it's absolutely deadly for wild dogs, because wild dogs are so social that they'll constantly touch each other and lick each other and sniff and feed together. So if they've got rabies, it's passed through the pack very quickly, and the dogs, pretty much the entire pack, will then die from it. So it's a very big problem. We've had a number of and see if they can come up with a way to vaccinate dogs from rabies. It's a difficult treatment because they have to do it quite regularly, and obviously wild dogs are a tough animal to find and they move a lot, and so it's not an easy thing to do, but they are trying to come up with ways to see if they can vaccinate against it and try and keep our wild dog population safe so that they can start growing and not declining the way that they have. It's very sad that the wild dogs unfortunately are losing out a little bit and starting to decrease in numbers. It's always better when we have animals increasing, but hopefully they'll get it right. Peyton, you're wondering what can be done to help them since they are endangered. Well, Peyton, there's a lot trying to be done. There's a lot of dogs that are being trying to put into new areas again, areas where they used to occur that they are no longer there, trying to get the populations to grow in different places. There's also a situation where they're trying to come up with ways to treat distemper and rabies so that they, like I say, can vaccinate these dogs so that even if the dog comes into contact with something that has got rabies, it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily going to get it, so it will be able to stay away, stay safe and not get infected. So that's the idea, is to try and do those kind of things, as well as to raise awareness about wild dogs. Wild dogs are not a very well-known animal. Everybody just kind of thinks of, when we say predators of Africa, everyone thinks of the lion and the leopard and these kind of things, but the wild dogs are very important. So it's to try and get more people to know about the wild dogs and try and get more people to understand how important they are and how rare and endangered they are, and what we need to do to try and stop all these things. We also need to start educating the people that live on the fringes of these game reserves that they need to vaccinate their domestic dogs against rabies and distemper, so that if those dogs do get into the reserve, that they're not transmitting that disease this way and bringing it into our wild areas. So that's all the kind of programs that are going on at the moment. There's lots of people on the fringes that are treating all the domestic dogs as well, and that's trying to keep these guys much safer, as well as all the other animals. There's a number of different. But isn't it beautiful when they stand up? Look at those beautiful eyes as well. And the big ears, they're very cute. So, Kelly, you're wondering why wild dogs sleep during the day, and Julian, you're wondering if they're nocturnal. So, Katie, the thing is, the wild dogs sleep during the day because it gets very hot here. So sometimes it can get over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that it is too hot for an animal with long fur to run around. Kelly, I don't know if you have a dog at home, but you know if it gets very, very hot, your dog tries to go and find some shade and rest there, and it waits until around this time. Now that the sun is starting to set, this is when the dogs start to wake up and start moving. So hopefully we will see them getting up and start moving shortly. And Julian, to answer whether dogs are nocturnal, no. Dogs are more what we call crepuscular, which means that they are active around sunrise and sunset. So they are not active that much during the night. Unless it is a full moon, you'll find that they then move if it's full moon because it's quite bright out here. But otherwise, sunset, sunrise, that's when they are at their most active, and then they rest during the middle part of the day so that they don't get too hot. Right, now while I sit with our wild dogs and see if they're going to wake up, let's go back across to my friend Scott, who's busy checking a very special place, and hopefully he'll... Well, our dogs are still very sleepy. Look at how they're having a little nap and probably dreaming of chasing all kinds of different animals around. And so hopefully they will start to wake up at some stage. It seems as though they're a little bit tired. They had a very busy morning this morning. They were chasing animals, and then they got chased by a leopard as well. The sister that Scott was talking about chased these wild dogs this morning, and so she was busy, and so the dogs have had a long day, so maybe that's why they're a little bit sleepy now. Okay, you're wondering what color eyes do wild dogs have? Well, the color of their eyes is an amber color, so yeah, hopefully it will open. And the problem is that they're in the shade at the moment, so it's not really getting any light, and so the eye appears quite dark. But they've got a sort of deep, rich amber brown coloration, and if the light is right and it comes out and it hits them in the eyes, then you start to see this more orangey brown color coming out. It's very beautiful when the light is good, but when it's dark like this and in underneath the trees, then their eyes appear very dark in coloration. I'm hoping that they will stand up because they are so beautiful when they do stand up. They've got lots of white little patches on them and lots of color, and they are very, very, very pretty, and each one will have a different color pattern. So it's like at home, if you had any dogs, all of your dogs would be a different color and a different pattern. It's the same with our wild dogs, is each one has got its own little markings, and that's how they can recognize each other, not only by smelling each other but also by seeing one another. They'll be able to recognize each other. Very sleepy little dog though. Caroline, you're asking if wild dogs can be pets. So no, Caroline. The reason why is that wild dogs move all over the place. So these guys can move easily 30 miles in a day, and so to keep them as a pet means it's very cruel to them. They're not able to move around, and they then become very depressed. Also, they eat too much, Caroline. They've got a very fast metabolism. Now, metabolism is the amount that your body is able to absorb food and to be able to process food. And so these guys, a pack like this, will need to eat twice a day. And when I say eat, they're eating a big impala, which could weigh as much as 180 pounds, and they can eat one of those twice a day. So imagine trying to feed that animal all the time. And also, they live in a pack, so you can't just have one. It would be very lonely. You would need to have it in a group together for it to feel comfortable and to feel like it's part of an area. So it's why we can't have wild dogs, also because they're endangered. All the wild dogs that are around need to be in the wild because we need them to be breeding, and we need them to have more puppies so that we can grow the numbers and not have them just sitting in a fenced off area somewhere. So we have to look after them and make sure that we're not trying to take them away from the wild. So, Olivia, you're wondering how many babies they can have? Well, a single female wild dog normally has anywhere from one baby can have all the way up to 18 is on average. There have been recorded cases of 21 puppies in a litter. So you can imagine 21 little babies is a lot of work for a pack. But the nice thing is for that mom is that all of the pack will try and after those puppies, and so all of them will come and help with feeding and help with protecting, so she's not on her own. The thing is, though, sometimes if you have the pack very, very successful, there can be a second female that will also have puppies. So sometimes you can have 30, 40 puppies in a same den, and then it's really a lot of work for the wild dogs. So unfortunately, when they have that many, sometimes there's just too many to look after, and the predators like hyenas sometimes kill them, and you end up with a situation where they get killed. So that's why it's a bit dangerous to have that many, and very difficult for them to keep feeding that many miles. But I think that our wild dogs are very, very sleepy at the moment, and so although there's one that's waking up in the back, look, you can see one is in the back, is stood up. Seems as though it's going to stretch for us in the background there. Maybe this is a sign that they're going to start waking up. They do this, though. They get up and they stretch a little bit, and then they go lie down, and then they get up and stretch and lie down. And so you'll find that it's kind of a slow process for them to wake up. And maybe we'll get lucky. Let's just give it 1 or 2 more minutes just to see if they do get up, because I've heard find the lions that were seen somewhere, and so we'll just have a little look and see what happens. But that dog looks like it's coming up now, which maybe the rest will wake up with it and start moving out as well. What animal is most dangerous? Well, Bailey, it depends on what you're doing. If you are on foot and walking around, then buffalo and elephant are very, very dangerous. But if you are in a vehicle, elephant is probably your most dangerous animal. Now, that sounds funny because you would think a lion might be the most dangerous, but the elephants are so big and so powerful that when they're very cross, they can throw a vehicle around and they can really hurt somebody very badly, if not even kill them. So elephants and buffalo are something that you have to be very careful of when you're walking around. The cats tend to be a little bit more nervous and they'll move away from you, whereas those guys will try and confront you and try and be big and strong and push you away. So it's very dangerous to be anywhere near those animals on foot. And then in a vehicle, you have to just give them their space and hope that they are comfortable with you. Right, I think because the dogs have all laid down, the other one has laid down again, I think I'm going to go try see if I can find these lions that I was telling you about, and so that you can all see the biggest and most powerful cat we have here in Africa. And while we do that, let's go to my favorite cat that Scott has sitting on top of a termite mound.